Welcome back. Now, Iran has summoned the Chinese ambassador following a joint statement from Beijing and Arab states. Saudi Arabia hosted China's president on Friday for a landmark summit. The statement included several references to Iran's interests, including its nuclear program, and the sovereignty of 3 islands in the Strait of Hormuz that are claimed by both Iran and the United Arab Emirates. To talk more about that, we're joined by Robert Mogielnicki. He's a senior resident scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, sir. So clearly this summit has upset the regime in Tehran. Why do you think China agreed to include those references?
Well, China, of course, Chinese officials just wrapped up a very important summit for them. And I believe these references were part of a host of issues. They certainly were not at the top of the priority list, among which were certainly issues concerning energy, trade, and investment. Of course, for me, this demonstrates the inherent challenges of China increasing its presence and increasing its role in the region. It's going to have to balance a number of very sensitive and controversial sets of relations on both sides of the Gulf. We saw over the past couple of days an incredible amount of political and diplomatic efforts going forward toward enhancing relations with Arab partners. Of course, China also maintains relations with Iran, and that will be a difficult balancing act going forward.
Well, President Xi also spoke about the shared values of China and the GCC countries, as he put it. What are those shared values, and is this the beginning of a new era?
I don't believe it's the beginning of a new era. I think that there's a lot more continuity than change in relations. China's role in the region has been increasing, at least from an economic dimension, for a number of years. So this summit is really a culmination of strengthening ties in certain countries. And I should reiterate, or I should stress, that China's presence and influence across the broader Middle East is not accelerating in every country and in every domain. We see China being in particular interested in some of the largest countries in the region with the biggest economies, where there's a lot of economic potential. And that is the reason why, to my mind, we saw the trip taking place in Saudi Arabia, with a state visit to Saudi Arabia, and also a summit with GCC officials. The GCC is going to be China's primary focus, at least from an economic point of view, in the region. But beyond economics, you're also going to see talk about, joint collaboration on security and defense, in particular countering extremism and terrorism, adhering to non-interference in domestic affairs, which is very important both to Chinese officials and increasingly to Middle Eastern officials as well. So those are a couple of the key topics that we saw emerge from these summits.
Just very briefly, is this a response to a perception that the US has in some ways abandoned its allies in the Middle East?
Well, that's a narrative that certainly is floating around. Of course, this summit, the state visit to Saudi Arabia, the summit with the Arab League, and the summit with GCC states does follow President Biden's trip to the region, which was very tense and at times very awkward. If we looked at President Xi's visit, there was a lot of alignment, not a lot of awkwardness. However, the context here is very important. Earlier in the year, we saw a delegation of GCC foreign ministers going to Beijing to make a show of the strategic nature of their relationship with China. And apparently, Chinese officials have been asking for that visit for many times and for a number of years. I see this latest summit as essentially the return leg. China sending a very high-level delegation to the region to essentially complete that those set of bilateral and regional meetings. So, again, is the U.S. component an important part of this equation? Yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle, but I don't see it as the primary motivator or the primary explanation in this summit.